In this topic we are going to have a look at the feature additional budget control liquidation validation. This is another one of our enterprise options which we see in our manage budgetary control page. So you can use the additional budgetary control liquidation validation feature to fail budgetary control validation when the liquidation of a transaction doesn't impact the same control budget as originally reserved. So if this feature is enabled, it will fail budgetary control validation with the fund status of budget period doesn't exist in the control budget when the liquidation of the commitment or obligation impacts a different control budget than the original reservation. This option is actually automatically enabled for new customers, but upgrade customers can choose if they want to enable the option. But once the feature is enabled, it cannot be disabled. If you disable the feature, but actually I think that should be, if you don't enable the feature, because once you have enabled it, it cannot be disabled. But if you don't enable it, then budgetary control validation passes if there is no liquidation budget period in the same control budget. The liquidation date is determined by the default date rule setting on the Manage Budgetary Controls page, and you can set that to be system date, current transaction budget date, or period related transactions budget date. Now this feature is only really applicable when you have chosen system date or current transaction budget date for your default date rule, because if you have chosen period related transaction budget date, it is going to use the same budget date as the original transaction. So if you enter the transaction and it uses budget, for example 2020, even if you are in 2021, because you have chosen period date, it is going to use that 2020 budget. So it doesn't really apply, and as I say, it is part of our enterprise options, which is in that Manage Budgetary Control page. We have been in there quite a few times. It does say give careful consideration to using this feature validation, as the additional validation may change the transaction life cycle if your organization doesn't carry forward open purchase orders, doesn't carry forward surplus funds at the end of the budget cycle, or create annual budgets. Now there is an example here to show you how it impacts the budgetary control results depending on that default date rule setting. So we have got an office supplies budget in 2020 and 2021 running from January to December in both years. The example that we have got here is that I have got a purchase order for office chairs with a budget date of the 24th of December 2020, and it reserves against the office supplies 2020 control budget. The payable invoice comes in the following year and has a budget date of the 19th of January 2021, and it's entered into the system on the 8th of February. So we have our budget dates for the purchase order are 24th of December, and the system date was the 24th of December, but the invoice comes in the following year. Budget date is the 19th of January, our system date is the 8th of February 2021. We are assuming that there are sufficient funds in all budget and our budget periods are open. So looking at our default date rule, if you have got current transaction budget date, the liquidation budget date is the 19th of January 2021. So if you have this feature enabled, what is going to happen? It is going to fail the validation because it is not liquidating in the same control budget as the purchase order was originally reserved, which was Office Supplies 2020. Invoice validation will place a funds hold because of the budgetary control failure. If you have enabled that feature, the liquidation isn't created because the liquidation budget period isn't in the office supplies for year 2020 budget period range. So the invoice gets validated. The same thing happens if you have got the default date set to system date. It is going to fail because it is not liquidating in the same control budget as the purchase order was originally reserved. And again, you will get a funds hold on your invoice, but if it's not enabled, the option, then the invoice gets validated. The liquidation is not created. With the period transaction budget date, our liquidation budget date is the 24th of December 2020, so the invoice is validated, the liquidation is created whether you have opted in or you haven't, because it's going to be looking at Office Supplies 2020 budget, which is the same budget that the purchase order was created in. So that's just an example of how that option works. Let me just take you quickly into the system and show you where you would see that option. So I am back into setup. I log into my system, go to setup and maintenance, select financial, budgetary control, manage budgetary control. This is our option for additional budgetary control liquidation validation. Thanks for watching. See you in the next lecture.